wildlife can certainly be an interest to many people. A lot of folks enjoy having wildlife on their property and managing for wildlife around their home or on their farm. And wildlife are certainly very valuable to the ecological world and to enjoy observing as well as hunting and fishing. However, we know that wildlife conflicts can obviously occur, particularly when they start causing economic damage. Then it's time to take action and solve the problem. And so today I want to just go over some basic concepts with you. I won't have time to go into a lot of detail on controlling specific species, but certainly want to give you all the resources that we have here with MU Extension and also through the Missouri Department of Conservation to help you be successful. We know that a variety of wildlife can certainly get in our pocketbook, if you will, and cause problems, whether it be raccoons and squirrels or skunks, rabbits, white-tailed deer, groundhogs was mentioned, of course, mice and voles, other rodents. Many of these can just be a nuisance, or they may actually cause some problems, denting in buildings, feeding in garbage, damaging sod, eating stems and crop and ornamental damage, damage to structures, all can occur. Just examples of this can be browsing damage from deer, raccoons eating sweet corn, birds defecating on your backyard furniture. All are just examples of how wildlife can be in conflict. And of course, there's many others we can all identify with. Moles, for instance, don't cause a lot of economic damage, but they can certainly be a nuisance in your lawn. So again, just some examples of wildlife depredation. Here's a nice example of robins pecking at fruit. And these are certainly issues that can cause economic losses that we need to take care of. I wanted to let you know of two excellent resources that we've just created with our MU Extension Nuisance Wildlife Program. We have a new webpage that you can go to that access all the guide sheets that we have. It's there at the top, Nuisance Wildlife. A lot of information there on that extension webpage. The one extension guide that probably does the best job of giving an overview of some of the different techniques that you can use to solve your problem is MU Extension Guide G9425, Solving Wildlife Damage Problems in Missouri. A lot of resources in this guide that I'll share with you in this real quick presentation. Basically, there's 4 components for any type of wildlife damage program, whether it be squirrels or raccoons or what have you. Number 1, take time to assess the damage and correctly identify the critter that's causing the problem. You certainly don't want to spend a lot of money on controlling a particular problem and misidentify the species you're working with. Then understand their behavior and their ecology. When do they have litters of young? What time of year are they most active? Things like that. And then take time to select the appropriate control technique and always evaluate your efforts. Keeping in mind that there's no silver bullet. There's a lot of different tools at your disposal. A lot of integrated types of management can be used. And another important question, think about how much damage you're willing to tolerate before implementing a control program. You may be able to tolerate some damage that you can live with. However, keeping in mind that anytime you invest in a damage control program, that takes time and money, and it may not be worth your effort. Maybe you can live with those conflicts and still have a nice corn crop, for instance. Also, it's important to know the legality of all the different methods at your disposal. We have labeled pesticides that we can use, but it's certainly important to follow those labeled directions. It's also important to follow all the state and federal regulations related to the Missouri Wildlife Code, because we have game species that could cause problems, and those are certainly regulated through our hunting seasons. But it's important to contact a Missouri Department of Conservation agent if you're needing to solve some problems that deal with game species. Also, keep in mind there's city regulations to adhere to. So you probably aren't going to go out and shoot and make a lot of noise within the city that's illegal. And then if you're trying to control birds, many of our species are covered under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Even woodpeckers causing damage to your cedar siding, you can't just go out and shoot those birds or trap them or deal with them unless you get a permit through the USDA Wildlife Services. Keeping in mind these different methods do have a lot of laws and regulations around them. Well, there's a number of management options we can think about to control and prevent damage from wildlife. The first one is really to manipulate their habitat. All wildlife need food, cover, and water and space. If you can change the dynamic of any of these by removing food, taking advantage of removing cover of their habitat, that goes a long way in solving a problem. Maybe you can eliminate the food resources, maybe build an animal out by fencing, excluding wildlife from an area. All go a long ways of preventing a problem from occurring. And here are some examples of using netting, fencing, and other types of measures to deter certain species, in this case, birds from a vineyard. Fences are certainly an excellent way to eliminate damage from occurring, and in particular with white-tailed deer. Some of the fencing, such as the exclusion fence, the 8 to 10 foot wire mesh, is a more permanent design and fairly expensive, except if you're dealing with high-value crops where you need to invest that type of money. These types of fences can certainly be very effective in preventing deer from entering an area and causing problems. There's a number of other types of fences that can be used that are more portable in nature. Electric fences, such as the 1 or 2 strand mylar or tape fence, or also the 17 gauge electric fence that you see around many of our livestock operations, are very effective for wildlife. More often, these are psychological barriers where deer might go up to the fence, particularly if it's baited with peanut butter or scented, and learn to avoid the area by getting a shock. They don't necessarily keep the deer out totally, but they learn to avoid the area by virtue of the shock they receive. There's a number of different designs that can be used. We have a deer damage guide that you can find in the webpage I shared with you that goes into much more detail on different fencing designs that can be used. And here's a couple examples of using some of the different 2 or 3 strand fence designs. In this case, baited with peanut butter on aluminum foil tags. And again, having the deer touch that with their nose and getting a shock and learning to avoid the area. Again, some different examples of how electric fences can be used around gardens to protect from deer. And here's a couple examples as well. Again, I mentioned the peanut butter fence, very effective. It's usually a single strand, 17 gauge wire, about 30 inches in height. And it can be temporary, it can be portable, you can move it, and the deer learn to alter their behavior psychologically. Very effective. Trapping, probably one of our best tools for a number of species. Here you see a few examples of some of the mole traps. Trapping is very effective for beaver. Also, we have a number of traps that are live traps that can be used as well for raccoons or woodchucks, skunks, what have you. And of course, traps are very effective for house mice, as we all know. Repellents, a lot of interest in using repellents, keeping in mind that they do not eliminate the damage. They may reduce it some. They must be reapplied regularly, whether you're using an odor-based repellent or a taste-based repellent. And really, they've shown a lot of mixed results, and they're fairly expensive to purchase. And again, they're out there, they're labeled for use. You can go to most of your home garden stores and find these products. Both the taste and area repellents or odor repellents can work. Here are some examples that you commonly see. Different products, again, out there. Also, there's non-commercial types that have been tried and used for various situations, including human hair, soap bars, even using rotten eggs combined with water, using a sprayer. All have been tried and used. And if it works, that's great. Keep using it. But again, one of those tools that we have, probably shouldn't rely on repellents to a great extent. They're expensive. They have to be reapplied after a rainfall, for instance. And so just use those as you need. Of course, there's a number of labeled toxicants that are out there for different species. Some of these are restricted use pesticides, so keep that in mind. And others are non-restricted use. Most of us have used toxicants for maybe controlling house mice around our home, pretty commonly used. But toxicants can also be used for voles and other animals where they're labeled. And be sure to follow that label very carefully because they're very specific in their use. Also, we have all kinds of tools that can be used to harass an animal, whether it be windmills or scary balloons or mylar tape, aluminum tape foil, flags blowing in the air. Sound tactics can be used. A lot of visual controls, such as these effigies of an owl, balloons, reflective tape, all are in our toolbox. And mostly These are used for birds in many cases, but can also be used for other species as well. Again, here are some positives and negatives about using visual controls. But again, a tool that's at our disposal in our wildlife damage toolbox. Of course, don't forget about hunting. Very effective, particularly for white-tailed deer. Use the legal hunting seasons if you have opportunities to do so, and take advantage of having venison in your freezer, and an excellent way to enjoy the outdoors and also have an impact on depredating deer you might have. So again, no panaceas at all. Don't believe the silver bullets and all the advertisements for some of these things. Make sure you have research-based information, which our extension guides provide. Think about a variety of solutions and select the one that's most cost-effective. Again, that's the bottom line. Cost-efficient, effective measures, and those that are humane as well. So again, that's really what I wanted to cover today. Very quickly, we have a number of resources that we have. The Missouri Department of Conservation has wildlife damage biologists in the various regions of the state that can provide technical assistance. And here's some of the resources that you can have access to. And hopefully you'll have a success in keeping any problem wildlife at bay.